Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you are thoroughly enjoying your third day here. It's really been an exciting set of sessions and a terrific meeting. And welcome, Stefan. It's wonderful to see you here again, and welcome back to Boston. Stefan was saying that he ended yesterday with a town hall meeting of all of the Bayer employees in Germany, is here today, and will leave later and return back to Germany. So thank you very much, Stefan, for making the trip. What we're going to do this morning, we have 30 minutes, and we're going to certainly talk about AI, but I think it would also be of value, particularly to many of the younger individuals in the room, to talk a little bit more about Stefan's approach to the pharmaceutical industry, to professional career opportunities a bit, and also some of the other topics that might be a little bit politically sensitive here in the United States. So we're going to have fun, and also don't hesitate to submit questions. I've got my iPad here that I'll be culling questions out in a bit. But let's start with Bayer. Certainly we all know Bayer. We know Bayer aspirin. We all grew up with advertisements about Bayer aspirin. And I think it's a story about how a company can be founded based on a single product where the potential may not be fully realized at the time it's discovered, and then one thing builds upon another. But Stefan, you have to be able to tell us something about how aspirin was discovered.
Well, Betsy, first of all, I'm delighted to be back here in Boston. A great city, so much dynamics around what's happening here. So aspirin, I don't know if that fits in well. The beauty of aspirin is when you work for Bayer and you enter the United States, there's this very friendly gentleman at the immigration that always asks you, what are you here for and what do you do? And when you tell them that you work for Bayer, immediately the response is, oh, aspirin. A few years back, the second one they always would give is, oh, Cipro. But it's basically aspirin. So aspirin, I don't know if you know, because there are young folks in the room. It was discovered in 1899 by German scientist Felix Hoffmann. Those were the days when pharmaceutical research came from chemicals, but not from chemicals like you know. It's basically from dye stuff, from colors. And by accident, sort of in the late 1900s, the scientists discovered, well, that these things may actually work also as painkillers, for example. And in that vein, also aspirin was discovered. And over time, and I think this is a beauty for, if you like, life cycle management in pharmaceuticals. We started to realize that aspirin would do much more than just cure pain or treat pain. And you as a cardiologist, you know more than anybody else that today aspirin is a standard treatment in secondary prevention. And still, as of today, we haven't discovered anything better as the basic therapy that has a backbone here.
Yes, and actually, it's still part of our treatment guidelines for primary prevention. Baby aspirin for men over age 55 to prevent heart attack, and in women over 65 to prevent stroke.
Yes.
Still a mainstay.
Thank you for clarifying that we, of course, also welcome.
These are American guidelines.
No, and we totally welcome those guidelines, and we think, it's not just the apple a day, but also if you add an aspirin, that keeps the doctor away.
Good. Well, let's talk about AI, because this is a conference on AI. And maybe we can start out, Stefan, if you could perhaps just simply orient us to how you're thinking about AI and applied to pharmaceutical work that you're doing within Bayer. How is it beginning to add value to your own intrinsic research, commercial development? How do you see it adding value to the value chain going forward?
So when you think about AI, just picture yourself in a boardroom with a lot of mid-aged men for the most part. And then everyone now talks about digital and about artificial intelligence. I would venture that 2/3 of people that talk about it don't really know what they're talking about. And that's maybe also sort of like a segue into artificial intelligence. I've recently written an internal memo where I said, one of my preferred sentences, I don't know what I don't know. And then I said, that truism may not be so true anymore. Because I think we're coming into times when all of a sudden, thanks to machine learning, we're capable of not just building on a hypothesis and then proving a hypothesis, but go the other way around, and come to a different way of achieving an endpoint by turning things around on its head. What does this do to us in a company? We basically look along the entire value chain, from production, how can we use digital and machine learning, for example, to create a more paper-free production, how to enhance and make it faster to get those batches through in production, which is going to reduce cost, but also is going to improve quality. We were just recently, in our case, selected by the World Economic Forum for having the most advanced production side in terms of digitalization. So that's AI where it gets into practice. Then in R&D, on the research side, in coming up with designing molecules in a different way. I was the other day with some of our researchers in one of our labs, and one of our preclinical assets, they were showing me on the screen how thanks to also AI, how they were adapting the molecule, a very complex molecule, better to the target structure that molecule would be interacting with. And then on clinical development, it continues. We just signed, I think, these days here in Boston, a collaboration for improving our cardiovascular and stroke clinical development. We have a number of assets preclinically that now move into larger clinical trials. And in order to not just reduce cost for clinical development, but also improve likelihood of outcome, we need to select the right population. And if we can, through intelligent machine learning, use the data that you collect in your hospital and stratify to that populations as we go into clinical development, that's a big help. And then lastly, today in the way we communicate about our medicines to patients, to healthcare providers, you couldn't think of doing that without algorithms behind that explain to us who to target, who to go for, what message would work best and be most relevant to our target audience. So we apply artificial intelligence throughout, or machine learning throughout the entire value chain.
Yeah, well that's very helpful. Help us understand how you and Bayer leadership have come to these sorts of decisions. Is this a top-down decision that your board members have made, or is it a bottoms-up and you've asked for conceptual buy-in at the board? Does the board say we're going to allocate X million a year for these different case uses? How, as a company, how do you approach it?
So this is a very good question, Betsy. It goes a little bit both ways. So I think a lot of it must be bottom-up by nature, because ideas typically don't occur only top-down. But then you need top-down support. Organizationally, to reflect this is not so easy. Some companies have now started to create chief digital officers in their companies. We're looking into creating some more centralized structure as well that helps to sort of oversee some of these more digital type activities, but I think in the end it comes bottom up, and you need to have, and that is changing, you need to have a generation of leaders at the top that is capable of accepting this bottom up type of dynamics, but also to understand them a little more. I was last week I was at one of the research institutes in Berlin, and there was this head of the institute, I think my age, roundabout. I didn't ask him, but I said to him, it looks like there is a new generation coming up actually running things, and it gives a different look and feel to how we can actually drive innovation forward. And I tell you, this is one of the most rewarding things, since I'm in the seat that I'm in, that you can actually do things.
Right. In Germany, do you have a faith and an aspiration for millennials like we do in our country? Basically just turn this all over to our millennials and they'll figure it out?
Well, I'm sometimes struggling with that. So I remember that when I grew up, and when I had in my early 20s, I was on my very first job. I was sent to Latin America, and we had my first internet thing, and I feel like, why are they so much more native than I am? Because I started very young being exposed to all these digital technologies. So yes, I think we're seeing more and more millennials coming in. This is, by the way, a big challenge, I think, for our Western industries and Western, even China now, an aging population. And there's sort of like this gap when the baby boomers all go on retirement, who's going to fill all those new positions? So I hope we find enough millennials to actually backfill for that once we go and retire.
Talking about talented young individuals, millennials, I'm sure we have many, many in our audience here. You and I were talking before we came onto the stage about innovation and how do we foster innovation locally and across our country. We were talking a bit about the Boston ecosystem now, which really is so well known for providing opportunities for innovation that can have a broad spread. Maybe you can share some of your ideas and experience about innovation with us. You've recently invested in Kendall Square, 60,000 square feet, 300 employees. You talked about building innovation in Berlin. Compare, contrast, what are you observing?
So first of all, I need to congratulate you because you were one of the architects of this ecosystem here with the Brigham, which sort of like seems to be one of the pivots around which innovation really comes to life. Boston, and I tell you this, we look at Boston around the world as an example to copy in a way, because you've managed to create this ecosystem of multiple academic institutions plus a hospital. So really this bench to bedside concept. So there is a translative element that where you manage all of this fundamental research to clinical research to actually putting it into practice and ultimately having also the money to create technological transfer that I've never seen anywhere else in the world. And I think it's funding on the one hand, starting with NIH, but also the way how hospitals are funded in the United States, and then venture capital when it comes to setting up companies. That is something that we don't see in the same way somewhere else. And we're trying to find ways, if you take Germany, for example, or take France, where I think we have really strong basic research, very strong basic research, and a lot of those basic researchers actually end up here in Boston because this is where they can live their dream best, whether they come from Asia, Europe, or South America, or where have you. So everyone is trying to find this magic potion that you guys seem to have discovered, and also create that somewhere else. Berlin, to give you an example, we have the Charité, which is one of the oldest and most well-known hospitals in Europe. It's the largest European university hospital, and there we're actually looking into how can we create a better link between basic research and clinical research. How can we better create translation and technology transfer? And we're looking to Boston as an example. We don't benefit from the same funding, at least not from the same public funding. Private funding is coming, and even Bostonian venture capitalists, I can tell you, they're going in and out of my office now in Berlin, looking at how they can better profit from and better take advantage of basic research out of Germany, for example.
What advice would you have for individuals in the room here and in our ecosystem who are completing MDs, PhDs, MD, PhDs, are interested in discovery research and bringing it forward to commercialization? What's the best way to get a start? Would you suggest getting a start in academics and then moving into biotech or pharma? Or would you say go directly into biotech and pharma, given the high quality of research that's going on and career opportunities? What do you recommend to young folks?
It's hard to generalize. I think it depends on the academic quality. If you are this bright and young researcher that has, you have a vision of something, or you have an idea, and you want to put this into practice, into a new medical procedure, into a new medicine, into a new device or a new diagnostic. If you have this very clear in your head, I still think that academia is the first step to take, because it gives you the credibility and it gives you the base. And from then onwards, at some point, you either move on to large pharma or diagnostics or device manufacturer, or you create your own company. And the beauty of America is that you still have all the elements in place to live that dream and create your own company. And so if I had to restart today, probably would be going for, at some point, to build my own company, if you have the right ideas. Yeah. Without the right ideas and without innovation, it doesn't get you anywhere. And we were talking about this. If you look at America and what America stands for, and the economic strength of this country is in the end built on innovation. And what more beautiful area can there be than innovating in healthcare?
Speaking to the choir, I'm sure. I'm going to turn to some of the questions from the audience in our last few minutes. So here's one. How do you prepare the leadership at your company for the new digital age? How do you ensure your company remains attractive for talent? Do you see a talent efflux due to outdated corporate structures and leadership styles?
Oh, many questions.
Yeah.
So efflux because of outdated management structures, I think yes, we have to admit that. Okay, that happens in large corporations. I can guarantee you that I'm trying to fight it. I'm trying to fight it by shaking up a little bit, maybe also some of the traditional way of going about things. That doesn't come easy, because how do they say? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if I come up with a good idea on how to do things, I can tell you there's a lot of resistance in the system. But slowly but surely we're getting there. And then how do we build this newness into our executive leadership is by being exposed to it. Get out of the boardrooms and into the hospitals, get into the clinic, get into the community, talk to people. Like I'm out here today. I know this is sometimes hard to do, but otherwise you will never get it if you don't do that.
Yeah, good. Let's see. First generation AI deals with its use as a technical tool for using data. Are you ready for a second generation AI to enable overcoming the major problems in medicine of overcoming the lack of response and improved efficiency to existing treatments? So I guess the question is getting at a second generation AI which will help perhaps our decision making and our therapeutic plans be far more efficient.
So I think it's inevitable. So I can be for or against it. It doesn't make a difference, because it's anyway going to go there. So I think there are two ways of approaching AI. One is by improving what we know and creating efficiencies. I'll give you an example. We know how to read an image from a radiology image, but a machine can probably do that better. So if we take enough time, we'll find the mistake. The machine will spot it flawlessly with 99.99% accuracy, when the human eye will need time for that. So those type of decision-making, improved decision-making, will just become the new norm. The difficulty, I think, is to have platforms on which all this innovation actually translates into clinical reality. I'll give you an example. We have we received breakthrough designation for a device we developed together with Merck here in the US to detect CTEPH. CTEPH is a rare form of pulmonary hypertension. And so we have developed an imaging AI device that helps you detect, when you do an MRI, you detect this form of disease, which can be lethal, much more accurately. Now, I'm sure there are many computer-based solutions out there that can improve whatever you want. but you need to add it to clinical practice. In our case, we're one of the leaders in radiology, so we have a radiometrics platform on which software can be put on. So we use that innovation and actually bring it into clinical practice. I think that's going to be a challenge, but that's one thing. The other one is really turning it around. When today we do clinical research basically by creating a hypothesis. So this is an endpoint I want to reach, and I'm going to compare my medicine to a placebo-controlled arm and see if that hypothesis holds true. I think in the future this goes the other way around. I have 1 billion endpoints, because that's the data that you provide. And I can go the other way around and can actually see, not hypothesize whether this one drug does it, but hypothesize which therapeutic pathway serves best to the patient. That's a different form of transparency. I think we will have to accept that also from an industry perspective, and we'll have a different way of approaching innovation. We just got to make sure as we do this that we still have enough incentives on the industry side to actually foster innovation, because our business is super risky today. Okay, whatever we discover in medicine discovery, we're in the business of failure. We're not. This is one of the few industries that lives off failure and much more than success. So we got to still create the incentives to go for that risky approach going forward in our industry. And then we're all for more transparency.
Yeah. Terrific. We have a few minutes left. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the collaboration around cardiovascular that's being established here in Boston. With collaboration goes across multiple institutions, multiple investigators. What has motivated you to do it? What do you hope to achieve with the collaboration?
So we've been now for a number of years been a very strong partner of the Boston community. Had some mostly cardiology related partnerships with Broad, for example, and what we expect is that because of the level of innovation that we have here in this hotbed of science, that we can tap into that, and not just data, because there is, thanks to you amongst others, an endless amount of high quality data that's generated, because it's not just data, it's also the quality of the data, of clinical data, but then algorithms behind and way of combing through the data that helps us learn something about it, not just apprehend it as data, but really increase knowledge. And for example, I was mentioning that setting up clinical trials in a more effective and more efficient way, we hope to do so with a collaboration with Brigham, with Broad here in Boston.
Good. Chris, keep me on time. Do we have time for one more question? Oh, we have 7 more minutes. Okay, I can't see a clock here, so.
7:28.
7:28. Oh, excellent. Oh, we've got plenty of time. Good. All right. Let me ask a very sensitive topic. Give us your view about drug pricing. You know, there's going to be there is a lot of conversation. It's the hot topic for politicians to talk about now, locally and across the country. Is this something that a German-based company thinks about? What do you think?
Well, we think about pricing our medicines around the world. The mechanism of pricing will change country by country. Now, I'm sure that you are more interested in my view on the US situation. There's a lot of debate going on inside the pharmaceutical industry and also in our interaction with the government. I know that Alex Azar was here on stage. I'm sure he talked about a lot of things. I don't know if he talked about rebate reform. What I can tell you is that the US system has become so intransparent that patients, consumers, do no longer understand anything about pricing of their medicines. You may have a sticker shock when you get prescribed a certain medicine, when in reality, those same medicines enjoy rebates up to 90% that the manufacturer pays to the different payers. And so there is a lack of transparency, and this is why there is an initiative ongoing that Alex Azar is very much supportive of reforming rebate, for example, for Medicare patients. If you take a Medicare Part D patient that in a high-cost medicine, if these people, there's no pass-through of rebates, then that translates into a real problem for healthcare. And so I think there's reform needed, and I think ultimately pricing should be a reflection of the value that you bring, and the value that you bring should be relatively easy to also calculate in numbers. Value is, for example, if you can go to work instead of being sick, if you can be at home instead of being hospitalized, if you can enjoy your life without side effects instead of suffering from side effects from some treatment. And those degrees of innovation should also be reflected in price. We will need, as an industry, a certain level of price to refinance innovation. There's no going around that. And again, I think if you look at America and why America excels in pharmaceutical innovation, it's also because America still allows for fair pricing of innovation. So that should not be taken away. And maybe one last thought on pricing. We always like to reduce healthcare costs to pharmaceutical prices. When you actually take a look at, and I don't know the US numbers by heart, but I happen to know the German ones. So in Germany, we spend about 15% of healthcare on medicines, 15%. In those 15% are hidden all kinds of other things, amongst them generics, rebates, and what have you. And when you actually look into patented drugs, so patented medicines that are the supposed culprits for high-priced medicine, the overall spend of German healthcare, which is seen to be, by the way, of course, the best one in Europe. No, I didn't say that. A very good one in Europe, I wanted to say. So if you take just patented medicines, it's about 4% of the total envelope of healthcare. I've used the example with a politician in Germany saying, like, okay, if you want to go about lowering drug prices, why don't you just nationalize us all? We have had a wonderful experience in East Germany of that. 50 years of nationalized pharmaceutical industry, not a single patent in 50 years. Just a little reference to what happens when you go communist. And so you can do that, and you're probably going to take all the profits out of our industry. Let's say our industry makes 30% profit, 4%, you take 30% out, that's 1% lower. That's what your hospitals are going to eat up in the next quarter in terms of cost. So we also need to put things into perspective when we talk about healthcare costs, the benefits that we get and the value that we get out of pharmaceutical innovation, and how much we really spend on that innovation.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. By analogy, there's a cost to innovation in academic medicine as well, in that we have long used our clinical margins to subsidize our academic missions, our research and education in the United States. And we know for innovation to continue, as we train the scientists, physicians of the future, we need to reinvest in innovation in our academic medical centers.
What I've made a mission in life for myself when it comes to that is we need to overcome these silos in our industry, where you have the industry, private industry on one side, academia on the other, hospitals on the next, ambulatory care again. And we all fight for resource very often in a system, when in reality, we are all going for the same goal, is bringing better health to patients. Because that's all that matters. That's what we're here for. And quite frankly, in my industry, when you don't believe me, I tell you, if I don't do that, I'm not going to be profitable, and I'm not going to sell my medicines if I don't bring better health to patients. So automatically, I have to have this as my primary goal, and I know that you do too in clinical practice.
Yeah, we do. So I'd say, Stefan, welcome to Boston. we look forward to Bayer being a valued and integral partner to what we do, and maybe we can continue to break down silos between healthcare sectors and show how we can really collectively add value to the healthcare system. So it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.